This is an emergency transmission. Citizens of the world, please, make no mistake. The zombie apocalypse is near. Will you cower and hide, or join us and fight? We are Dezombified, so stay on point and watch your six.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Evil here on Dezombified. I'm Steve Stockton. Joining me in a minute will be the other half of the show, Gemma Jade. Just want to take a moment here and say hi to everyone in the chat. Fear the Great White, good to see you. Rick Brab, hello, sir. You were on my streams early this morning. Chris Jarvis, most dangerous man on YouTube. How you doing, Chris? Jose, good to have you with us. Mutant Artificial Intelligence. You've been, I think, at all my streams lately, overnight, and some of them 10, 12 hours. Let's see. And of course, Dezombified, hello to you guys. Thanks for hosting us, as usual. Unseelie Turtle. Don't recognize you, but welcome in. If you've been here before, welcome back. Otherwise, just welcome. Jenny Lindquist, how are you? Did you find any bodies today in the swamps there in the Everglades? If you did, you can turn them in for cash and prizes. Just kidding. David S. Vangman. Hey there. How you doing, buddy? We'll get fired up here in a minute. Sorry, we're running a little behind tonight. Fashionably late, as they like to say, but it's worth the wait. Got some good ones for you. Now, in the past, we've covered children who kill and mothers who kill their children. Tonight, we're going a different direction. We're going out of the family side of it to some degree. And we're talking about torture slayings. Gemma, you want to come on in and say hi to everybody, and then we'll get started?
What is up, you guys? How is everybody? Hi, Dezombified. Thanks again for having us. I don't want to go through the...
And yes, collectively, we are known as STEMA. That applies
yes,
to both of us.
I don't want to go through the entire list of names again, but all of our regulars and everybody who's new on Sealy, I really wish that there was a zombie apocalypse right now, too. I'm actually prepared for it, and I already know which one of my neighbors' houses I'm going to take over as soon as it happens.
I'm going to put treadmills all around my house, so that way they just, once they get on the treadmills, they don't get any closer.
Jeannie, Cookie, Jose, David, everybody, just hello. I'm so happy to be with you guys. I look forward to it all week, talking to you all. So we have some pretty really evil stuff to talk about tonight. Just when I think it can't get any worse, you know, the first episode I couldn't be here. Then we went to the Killer Kids with Mary Bell, and I was like, oh man, this is horrible. And then last year, the filicide, and last week,
Seems like a year.
The filicide, and then now this, and I'm like, it's just getting more and more evil.
Well, we're just scraping the surface here. There's a lot of real evil out there.
Yes.
That most people just aren't aware about, and you know, rightfully so. It's not something that you want to concentrate on or think about a whole lot, but it is there if you want to delve into it. Now, starting off tonight, just by show of hands or drop a number in the chat or something, let me know how many of you enjoy true crime paperbacks. Now, that's a guilty pleasure of mine as well. There was a used bookstore in Knoxville that I would go and buy them just by the bagfuls, and met some interesting people. A lot of it was little old ladies. I would be in the true crime section, and a little old lady, I'm talking like maybe in her 70s, gray hair, granny glasses, she would toddle over to me, hold out a book and said, have you ever read this one? He did it with an axe. And I'm like, this is great.
Can I just tell you, you reminded me of something I just want to say that I've been planning all week to let you guys know, and I forgot. one of the cases we're going to talk about tonight, now that you mentioned paperbacks, I came across somehow, I think I bought it at Barnes & Noble's, the first ever true crime paperback I ever read in the year 2000. And that's what got me completely hooked on true crime. I read as many true crime paperbacks I get my hands on. Then all the shows started coming out. It was called Whatever Mother Says. And it was about Teresa Noor, who we're going to be talking about in a little bit. So yes, I do love the true crime paperbacks, and I just wanted to throw that in there. This case is what got me. One of these cases we're going to be talking about tonight is what got me into true crime. Without that book, who knows if I'd even be here today.
And what was the name of the book? It sort of phased out or something. I couldn't hear all that clearly. Maybe
I
just the
believe it
name?
said Whatever Mother. I believe it was called Whatever Mother Says.
Okay, I'm making a note of that.
Yeah, Whatever Mother Says, I believe. Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't remember the very first one that I read. Probably Helter Skelter, because I remember when all that happened and when the trial was all over TV, and I bought that in hardback. I had a hardback first edition. I'll do that every now and then. I'll clean out my library and sell some of the more collectible pieces because I could always read a paperback of it. But that was probably the first one. But one of the other ones that I had at a very early age was called the Indiana Torture Slayings, and it's written by a man named John Dean, who wasn't that well known at the time, but later on he would be the attorney or counsel for the Nixon presidency, and we know all about Watergate and all those fine things. But he had written a paperback, what's considered by many to be one of the first true crime paperbacks. Came out, I want to say, like in the mid 60s or so, the Indiana Torture Slayings, and that is a rarity. It's, if you can find it in its original first edition printing, it's worth a lot of money. There's some kind of noise going on there. Is that okay? It stopped. I had a second edition, second paperback printing that I sold years and years ago for like $300. So it was one of those that, if you could find a copy of it, it was like the holy grail. And there used to be a fanzine that I read out of San Francisco by a man named Johnny Marr called Murder Can Be Fun. And he had a whole episode or a whole edition of his magazine dedicated to that book and collecting true crime paperbacks and things. So fascinating. He's online if you do a search for Murder Can Be Fun. I think he's got a blog or website or something out there. But anyway, for those not familiar, it was a child murder case in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, it wasn't like the ones we covered last week, where it was a mother who killed her. It was a caregiver. And boy, I'm going to butcher this name. We just call her Trashy Gertrude. Gertrude Baniszewski. And that's
I think it's Benishevsky or Benszewski.
Yeah,
I think
like
it's Benishevsky, but we're not sure.
Gertrude B. And she was, like I said, a caregiver. She took care of her own children and neighborhood children. She was kind of a foster mom before there was such a thing, I guess. And she was charged with taking care of Sylvia Likens, who at the time of her death was 16 years old. And it's one of the most awful things you'll read about, especially when you get into the abuse that this little girl, and yeah, she was 16. That's not technically a little girl, but in my mind, that's a little girl, especially to have suffered this kind of abuse and stuff. Now, Gemma, what do you have as far as Gertrude herself?
I know I call her Trash Gertrude, and I pretty much know I lost all my tabs. I pretty much know that, yeah, she basically started this whole torture thing with this girl because the parents weren't able to pay her like the $20 a week. So
yeah, Gertrude had a bunch of her own children. She had like 7 children of her own, ranging anywhere from 1 year old to 17 when this happened. She was just 36 at the time.
And sorry, I just found some back information on Sylvia. So she came from a poor family, and the parents were like always fighting. It was like a rocky marriage, and
Sylvia's parents were carnival workers, so that was one reason they toured around a lot, and that was why they wanted to leave her with somebody.
So that's what I was saying. Her parents' name were Lester and Betty, and they had to work at a carnival. So they would board Sylvia and her sister Jenny out. And most of the time they would stay with relatives like their grandmothers. That way they can go to school and have a little bit of stability when their parents were off, doing the carnival thing. And Sylvia would work to earn money. She would babysit, she would iron. But they separated in 1965. And while Sylvia and Jenny were living with their mom, the mother was on hard times, so she had to shoplift, and eventually she got arrested. She got put in jail, and Lester took this opportunity to try to work on the marriage with Betty. So the two boys that they had, because they had, I believe, they had 5 children. Their daughter Diana had moved on. She was married. Their 2 sons, Danny and Benny, lived with the grandparents. I don't know if they were maternal or paternal, and they had to find somewhere for Sylvia and Jenny to go, the 2 girls. And they had a mutual friend at the time who introduced the Likens to who I call Trash Gertrude Banishevsky or Banaszewski. I'm going to call her Shevsky. She was using the name Gertrude Wright. She had a lot of aliases, and you're right, she had a large rented house, 7 children, aged 17, 15, 12, 11, 10, 8, and one that was only a few months old. And she quickly agreed to look after Sylvia and Jenny, but the parents had to pay $20 a week. So Lester knew Gertrude was also poor, but he was really happy to have someone watch the girls with all of these other kids in the house. He figured she was a good mom, and he didn't bother inquiring as to the condition of the home. He didn't bother going into the home and seeing it before he let his daughters go there, because remember, their mother was in jail. So he really didn't check the place out. He was just excited to have a place to put his daughters so he can go work at the carnival, work things out with Betty for when she got out of jail. And he did not do his due diligence. And things went really, really awry when the money stopped showing up, or when the money was late.
And just first she began abusing both the sisters, Sylvia and Jenny. And then at one point she kind of started focusing it almost entirely upon Sylvia. And it's been speculated that a lot of this abuse stemmed from just being jealous of Sylvia's physical appearance and the potential that she had in life. Even coming from a poor family, she still had better options ahead of her than Gertrude, through Gertrude's own poor choices and lack of impulse control. But initial abuse began subjecting both the
Or is it evil?
to beatings. Yeah, I think there's an evil component to it. She subjected them both to beatings and starvation, forced them to eat leftovers or spoiled food out of a garbage can. Even on one occasion, Sylvia Likens was accused of stealing candy she had actually purchased, and she would beat them she had a 1/4-inch wood paddle. That's 1/4 inch thick, like a cutting board size, that she would beat them on, and berating them with such statements when she didn't get the money as, well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing. So Gertrude wasn't the nicest person in the world to begin with, and when she wasn't getting her $20 a week, that just that helped drive her over the edge. But I think she was technically already there.
Yeah, they say that she was very frail, very underweight. She suffered from depression, and it says other ailments. And she always held a grudge. And for some reason, Sylvia, like you said, would bear the grunt. And when she said that, well, I took care of you for a week for nothing, the money was only a day late. And when Sylvia or Jenny would do something that Gertrude didn't like they would cash in glass soda bottles at the grocery store, she would get out a huge wooden paddle or a thick leather belt, which was left behind by an ex-husband, a former police officer, and beat them. And when Gertrude was too weak to beat them and abuse them and torture them, she had her daughter Paula step in and take over her beatings at first. I mean, eventually I think it became kind of a family affair.
Yeah, there's instances there where Paula was pregnant herself, 3 months at the time this happened. And Gertrude informed Sylvia and the other girls in the house that if you did something with a boy, you would be sure to have a baby. And then she would kick and punch them in the genitals. And then Paula, herself being overweight and pregnant at the time, was also jealous of Sylvia's physical appearance, and she participated in the attack. Once
Well,
she knocked Sylvia off a chair on the kitchen floor, shouting, "You ain't fit to sit in a chair." But this
Ger-
is fun family here.
Gertrude encouraged not only her own children to beat and abuse Sylvia, but also she let the other neighborhood children come in and participate. And these children would take turns practicing their judo moves on Sylvia, hurling her against walls, practicing chokeholds, even knocking her unconscious with broom handles. Gertrude eventually started extinguishing her cigarettes on Sylvia's skin. Then all the others would join in when they'd smoke. Sylvia would become the ashtray. Gertrude would watch, laugh, and urge them to do greater levels of abuse. And Paula used her as a punching bag, hitting her with enough force a couple of times to break bones in Paula's own hand. Once her hand was placed in a plaster cast, she used the cast to beat Sylvia even harder. And then Gertrude would make her take scalding hot baths, which would burn her skin so she could be, quote, cleansed of her sins, end quote.
Oh, yeah. And then when all this was over, they found in excess of 100 cigarette burns on Sylvia, which is just. And I won't even tell you, just for decorum's sake,
Yeah, we've got to leave
um,
some of this out.
what they
Yeah.
forced her to do with the Pepsi bottle in front of the
Yes.
whole family. And this was a girl, that was somewhat shy. That was she didn't feel very good about her appearance because she had a tooth missing and didn't smile much or anything. But they just really, really took it out on her. And at one point, they even, I think Gertrude took a sharp instrument like a knife or a razor blade or something and wrote across Sylvia's chest and belly, "I am a prostitute and proud of it."
Gertrude labeled Sylvia as a, I don't know if I could say the WHORE word. And she told people that Sylvia was highly promiscuous. She told other people she was pregnant. We'll skip through, like you said, the lewd acts, the soda bottle. But her area down there was hit and kicked so often that she lost the ability to control her bladder and her bowels. And she would wet her mattress at night and go on herself. And Gertrude decided at this point that Sylvia could not live with the other children anymore. She wasn't fit to live with the other children because she couldn't stop wetting herself. So Sylvia was tied up and locked in the basement and kept naked. She was denied the use of a toilet until she learned to stop soiling herself, but she couldn't because of the abuse is what caused it. And the abuse didn't stop at this point. Sylvia was untied, but she was only untied or released when Gertrude or some other juvenile, one of Gertrude's kids or one of Trash Gertrude's neighborhood kids, when they wished to beat on her and abuse her. And both Gertrude's kids and neighborhood kids enjoyed pushing Sylvia down the stairs, so they would repeatedly force her to climb up, then shove her back down, and they would all laugh and egg the other ones on. They would solicit help of neighborhood boys. Yeah, they wrote the prostitute thing. Later, Gertrude would taunt her, telling her she'd never marry because of the words scarred on her body. She forced Sylvia to write letters to her parents confessing of doing things with a gang of boys, blaming the boys for her injuries and the message on her stomach. So Trash Gertrude had Sylvia write the letter saying that I did all these bad things with a whole group of boys and they did all of this to me.
And there were times when the parents did actually visit, and on one occasion, after they had visited, the girls, of course, were scared to say anything because Gertrude and her kids were all there, and they knew there would be repercussions. So they maintained the silence in front of their parents. And as soon as their parents left, Gertrude turned to face both the Likens girls and said, "What are you going to do now that they're gone?" So this was just an ongoing thing. Even
Horrific.
even in school, Sylvia, I mean, the teachers and things knew that something was wrong. She had open sores across her entire body. She went to Arsenal Technical High School, and she hadn't been to school in several days. A school nurse actually showed up to investigate, but Gertrude, who was just a brilliant liar, claimed that the nurse that Likens had run away from home the previous week, and that she was unaware of her actual whereabouts, and that Sylvia was out of control, and that the open sores were a result of Likens' refusal to maintain her own personal hygiene. And the school nurse bought it hook, line, and sinker, and even agreed that with Gertrude's claim that the Likens were a bad influence on both her children and her sister. So school made no further investigations into Sylvia Likens' welfare, which
Well,
is sad. I mean, they could have saved her. They could have gotten her out of there.
did you? I was typing in the chat, so I'm sorry, I didn't really hear what you said. Did you talk about when the social worker came to the house
It was a school nurse.
Okay, to investigate an anonymous report of a girl with running sores on her body?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, because I was typing in the chat, so I didn't. I mean, and also, it says that around this time, Sylvia began being treated with, like, a nerving kindness in between bouts of the brutality. Gertrude would offer her sandwiches and crackers. Someone else would make her, and while she was eating the sandwich and the crackers, someone else would be making her drink her own urine and eat her own other stuff. And she was allowed to return upstairs to sleep in the bed, but she remained tied to the bedpost, and she still wasn't allowed to use the toilet. And she was still beaten and brutalized for wetting the bed, even though she was denied use to the toilet and tied to the bedpost. So psychologically, just that the psychological torture Sylvia overheard Trash Gertrude's plan to get rid of her. And on October 25th, 1965, Sylvia made a desperate attempt to escape, but she was so weak. She was so abused. She couldn't control her, bodily functions. She could barely walk at this point. And when she failed to attempt her attempt in escaping, she was beaten in the face with a curtain rod and thrown down the stairs into the basement. And once again, she was tied up, beaten into unconsciousness. When she came to, she was so messed up from the blows to the head, she wasn't able to speak intelligibly, and she couldn't move. She wanted to get out of the basement, but she kept collapsing, and she just would get up and fall back down. And when Gertrude found her, she crushed her head with her feet and just stood there watching her with her head under her feet. And on October 26, 1965, the next day, poor Sylvia Likens, may God rest her soul, finally submitted to her injuries and died. She was only 16 years old. And Stephanie Manischewski and Richard Hobbs found her body. Stephanie tried to give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but Gertrude stopped Richard, Stephanie, and anybody else who would try to help Sylvia try to resuscitate her by saying that Sylvia was faking it and just wanted attention. When Gertrude realized Sylvia wasn't faking it, she sent Richard Hobbs to call the police from a payphone. She had everybody help her put Sylvia in the bath, wash her up, redress her in something nice, and then laying her down on a mattress. And when the police arrived, she gave them the letter that she had forced Sylvia to write while she and the other children related the alibi that Trash Gertrude had created, and that Sylvia was uncontrollable. She was promiscuous. She stated Sylvia returned to the house after doing all those things with the gang of boys who followed her back to the house, mutilated her, and killed her. So that was the story that Trash Gertrude gave the police about what had happened to Sylvia. Did they buy it, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, and that was the thing. I don't know how this woman, other than through some sort of demonic influence, was able to convince so many people that Sylvia was the cause of all this. And Mutant Artificial Intelligence, you're correct. Gertrude deserves to burn in hell. And like the paintings by Dante, I hope there's a special, very, very hot circle in hell for people that torture and abuse children. Corinthian, good to see you with us tonight.
It's crazy that she was arrested eventually for injury to a person, because shocked by the story and Sylvia's body, the police were ready to leave. They did believe it because the writing was in Sylvia's own hand and people attested to it. But Jenny, Sylvia's sister, went up and said, if you get me out of here, I'll tell you everything. And her statement, as well as obviously the appearance of Sylvia's body, the police arrested Trash Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, John, Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard. Later, they arrested Mike Monroe, Randy Lepper, Darlene McGuire, Judy Duke, and Anna Cisco. These were all neighborhood children and the children of Trash Gertrude. And May 19th, 1966, Gertrude Manischewski was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She gains an appeal, but she was once again convicted. She never expressed any kind of remorse. And when anyone asked her about why she did this, she would say, quote, I had to teach her a lesson, end quote. In 1985, Gertrude was released on parole and lived peacefully under an assumed name until she died in 1990 of lung cancer. So she got to live free.
Yeah, that's just a shame. Now, going ahead, the autopsy of Lycan's body reveals she had suffered in excess of 150 separate wounds across her entire body, in addition to being extremely emaciated at the time of her death. The wounds themselves varied in location, nature, severity, and the actual stages of healing. Her injuries included burns, severe bruising, and extensive muscle and nerve damage. Her lower cavity was almost swollen shut, although an examination can now determine that she was surprisingly still a virgin, discrediting Gertrude's assertions that Likens was promiscuous and had been 3 months pregnant and a prostitute. Moreover, all of Likens' fingernails were broken backwards, and most
Oh,
external layers of skin upon her face, breast, neck, and right knee had peeled or receded. In her death throes, she was in so much pain, probably because Gertrude was, depending on which report you read, one little boy was rubbing salt into her wounds, and Gertrude was putting rubbing alcohol on her. But she was in such pain that she had bitten through her own lips, partially severing sections of them from her face. Now, the official cause of Lycan's death was listed by the coroner as a subdural hematoma due to receiving a severe blow to the right temple, because it's one of the reasonings behind this, maybe, when she was either dead or near death, Gertrude accused her of faking it and beat her with a book.
oh
And
my
then
gosh.
and then she did call him faker, faker. And that was right before she died. So she may have already been in the
When she
throes of
crushed her skull, yeah, under
yeah,
her,
but
well, not crushed her skull, but put
the
her head under her foot.
and then just all the other stuff, the shock that she had primarily suffered due to severe and prolonged damage inflicted to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, plus the severe malnutrition were all listed as contributing factors to her death. And at the time of the discovery of the body, rigor mortis had fully developed, indicating that she may have been deceased for up to 8 hours before she was found. The coroner, Dr. Cable, did note that Likens had been recently bathed, possibly after death, and this act could have hastened the loss of body temperature and sped up the
Well, yeah, you
onset
guys have to
of
remember
mortis.
too, we had to cut out a lot of
Yeah,
what
there's
they
a
had
lot,
done.
even
Like,
though we go there in some regards, there's just so much we couldn't say in this one. If it fascinates you, I mean, and it's a terrible, terrible case. But if you do want to know more, there are several books. There's been some films about it, but
there's a
it's
couple
just
YouTube videos too.
it's
I
dark.
mean, it's dark. You guys are sitting here like she should burn in hell. You have no idea what we left out. So I would urge you to
Yeah,
further. I might even do a deep dive at some point. I
yeah,
mean, I'm
and
backed up a
just the
month or two,
fact
but
that she died a free woman, Gertrude did
and she
that.
died a
Just that
free
burdens
woman.
me out
Yes.
more than she should have rotted in prison, and then they should have chopped up her bones and put them under the prison when she died.
It's unbelievable. It really is. And there are no
Uh,
words.
I need a
You know what I
shower
mean?
after cases like this.
That's
You know, it's like
you just took the
you,
words right out of
you,
my
you
mouth. Like
feel dirty.
I didn't even know
It's
what to
just
say. Like I
just hearing
feel
the words and
it's the fact that she, like you said, she died free. This poor, okay, 16 is not a little girl, but listen, I'm 38 years old. To me, 16 is a kid. I have a son who's 16. Like, that's a kid. That's
yeah,
not a grown woman. That's not, that's a kid, man. And
yeah, that's a
one thing I
child.
can't
That is,
stand, and I think a lot of you guys will agree, I don't like when anyone hurts anyone else, but hurting kids, man.
and an innocent kid. I don't think
Right. Just because
Sylvia
you're
did any
jealous
of
of the
that
way she
stuff.
looks.
Gertrude was jealous of her looks, and she wanted the money, and then just she would even charge the neighborhood kids a nickel to come in and abuse
Yes.
Sylvia. That just who
And
does
it's
that?
a
I
shame
mean, that's
because Sylvia would have went out and worked if Trash Gertrude had asked her to, I'm sure. If Gertrude had said, listen, your father's money didn't come, because Sylvia liked to work. She babysat, she ironed, she cashed in glass bottles. She would have, I'm sure, contributed to the family had Trash Gertrude just asked. And that's almost, I think that one might be as bad, or I don't even know which one is worse, honestly, in this one. Last week, I didn't know which one was worse. I don't know if Trash Gertrude is worse or
they're
if
all
Teresa
bad and they
North,
all get worse, I think. But
Teresa
I
North.
do want to say, just in light of this, Sylvia, yeah, she stayed there and she took it and it killed her. And I just want to say, I'm not throwing any shade at her whatsoever. She did what she had to do. She had to go along to get along. because understandably she was afraid it would only make it worse for her and her sister. But if you're out there, if you're in a foster home, if you're in any kind of a relationship where you're being abused, you're
Yes.
being tortured, and I'm not talking just physical abuse, there's mental abuse and mental torture too.
Hmm.
If you're in a spot where you need some help, reach out. There's all kinds of
And
help out
don't
there.
believe the hype that you're going to get in trouble or that something's going to happen. Don't believe it, that it's not your fault. Like, don't believe what your abuser says to you. I promise you, go
There
and get
are
help.
people that love you. There are people that care about you. There are people that will help you.
Even
Whether
people
you're a
that don't know
child
you.
or a grown ass adult like we are, there's places you can reach out.
Yep. Shall we move on?
Yeah. I'm gonna said I need a shower. I need to watch some kitten videos or something here, but
We're going to talk about
we talk about real evil. That's where we go. So, okay, Gemma, you take it away. I'm going to take a little break here and drink some coffee.
All right. We're going to talk about another Pisces. The woman that I was talking about from the book Whatever Mother Says, Teresa Jimmy Francine Knorr, and her maiden name was Cross. She was born March 14th in 1946. She was convicted of torturing and murdering 2 of her 6 children while using the other children to facilitate and cover up her crimes. She's currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. And just, you thought Trash Gertrude was a gem? Wait till you hear about this one. She was born in Sacramento. She was very close to her mother, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, or her father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but Teresa was very close to her mother, and her mother, Swanee Cross, kept her family afloat. But her mother died of congestive heart failure while she was walking into a store with Teresa and just collapsed. And that caused Teresa to have very bad depression. She was married, I believe, 5 times. She married a man when she was 16 named Clifford Sanders. He was 5 years older than her. She dropped out of high school, immediately became pregnant. Her first child, Howard Sanders, was born. So the couple argued frequently, and in June of 1964, Teresa claimed that he had punched her in the face during one of the arguments, and she reported the incident to police but refused to press charges, and the charges were dropped. They ended up obviously getting divorced, and listen, I didn't even know this part. I forgot about it. On July 6, 1964, the day after Sanders' birthday, so her husband, the couple were arguing because Sanders had spent his birthday out with friends instead of at home. And during the argument, Sanders informed Teresa that he was leaving her. He wanted a divorce. Well, Teresa became so enraged, she shot him in the back with a rifle as he was walking out the door to leave her. She was arrested and charged with Sanders' murder, to which she pled not guilty, claiming she was acting in self-defense by shooting someone in the back. Okay, first of all, there's so many things wrong with that. And second of all, had the justice system done what it was supposed to do, she would not have been free to have and murder these other children. So several of his relatives testified that he wasn't violent or abusive, and they said that she killed him maliciously and without provocation. Her older sister testified against her and said that Teresa was possessive and jealous and would kill him before any other woman could have him. However, she was acquitted of the murder, and she gave birth to her second child, Sheila Gay, on March 16th. After Sheila's birth, Teresa began drinking heavily, and she drank at an American Legion Hall. And this is where she met Estelle Lee Thornsberry, who was a disabled United States Army veteran. They moved in together. Teresa would routinely leave her children with this guy while she went out drinking, and he began to question Teresa when she stayed out for days at a time. The relationship eventually ended because Teresa was having an affair with his best friend. And she began a relationship with a Marine named Robert Knorr and became pregnant very quickly after, and they married in July of 1966. She had her third child, Susan, on September 27th. The couple had 3 more children, William Robert Knorr, Robert Wallace Knorr, and Teresa Terry Marie Knorr. So Teresa is the smallest. I'm going to skip over the rest of the marriages and just get into the meat of the subject. Knorr was physically, verbally, and psychologically abusive toward her children, and after her 4th divorce, her alcoholism and abusive behavior escalated because she gained a ton of weight and became quick-tempered and reclusive and jealous of her 2 oldest daughters. She disconnected the home phone, and she would not allow the children to have visitors. They lived in Orangevale, California, before moving into a 2-bedroom apartment in Sacramento, and her oldest son left home before the move to Sacramento. And according to the people that knew them, the apartment was filthy. It reeked of urine and poop, and neighbors noticed that children who Teresa never let go outside were always fearful, nervous, and high-strung. And for years, Teresa Knorr abused and tortured her children in various ways, including beating them, force-feeding them, burning them with cigarettes, throwing knives at them. She made some children hold the other child down while she beat and tortured them. And in one instance, she gave a pistol to her youngest daughter, Terry, put it to her head and told her that she would kill her. She primarily focused her abuse on the oldest 2 daughters, though. She didn't really bother with the sons, and she didn't really focus on the small one, Terry. And in 1982, Nora became convinced that her daughter Susan was casting spells on her that caused her to gain weight. Susan obviously denied it, but Nora became angry and decided to shoot Susan from behind with a .44 caliber she kept in the bedroom drawer. Now, this was after Susan had gone 2 years prior to the shooting to someone they were still allowed to go to school at this point, and she had gone to someone at school who went to social services. And when social services came in the house, they did not separate the children from the mother. And all the children said Susan was a liar. That's just how she was. Teresa Knorr pulled all of the children out of school. They were never allowed to leave the house. And she took her daughter Susan, handcuffed her to underneath the kitchen table, and went about life as usual for the next 2 years. She would force feed her macaroni and cheese, and if the girl got sick, she would eat what she got sick. And she told Susan, "I'll let you go if you let me take that bullet out of you. You're not leaving here with evidence in you." And she gave her a bunch of alcohol, tried to perform surgery. The girl got gangrene and died. Steve, you want to take over here, or?
Yeah, actually, we are up against the break. Let's take a break for a few moments.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. My bad.
Yeah, I just happened to see it myself. We're close, though. So relax, do what you got to do, chat amongst yourselves. We'll be back after this word from our sponsors. And we're back. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Let's see who else we've got in the chat here. Fear the Great White, Boney Plater, Realtors in Perspective. See who else has wandered in. I think that's all that we haven't said hello to. If we haven't said hello to you, our apologies. It's not a purposeful slight. Just getting into these cases here. Now, you're talking about how she wanted to perform surgery on the daughter and take the bullet out
She
of her.
said Sheila can go but the bullet was evidence.
Yeah. The bullet, it hadn't passed through Susan's body, but it was too deep to remove from the open wound. And so I'd leave it in, patch her up. But then later on, like I said, she agreed that it needed to come out. She started the operation by giving the daughter a handful of Melorel and a quart of hard liquor. And that worked. And before long, Susan was completely unconscious. Teresa then retrieved an X-Acto knife from the medicine cabinet and ordered 15-year-old Robert to cut into his sister's back and retrieve the bullet. How would you like to do that? Maybe if you didn't like your sister, but holy cow. Teresa barked orders from overhead as he made the incision. Before long, he'd cut through several layers of skin, muscle tissue, and using his fingers, he searched around inside the wound until he finally located and removed the bullet. The next day, as would be expected, Susan woke up, hungover and in horrible pain. Teresa gave her antibiotics and ibuprofen, but the medicines didn't have any effect and she kept getting worse. After a few days, her eyes turned yellow, sign of jaundice there, liver was failing, and she could no longer control her bowels. At one point, Terry noticed black marks on Susan's back, which she later were concluded from internal bleeding as a result of Teresa's last meeting. And then on July 16th, 1984, Teresa duct taped Susan's mouth shut and bound her arms and legs. Afterwards, she packed all the girls' belongings into trash bags and ordered Bill and Robert to put Susan in the car. They drove south on Highway 89 and eventually pulled off the road by Square Creek Bridge, where she ordered Bill and Robert to take Susan out of the car and carry her down to the creek bank. Teresa brought down the garbage bags herself and then doused everything, including Susan, in gasoline and struck a match. Everyone made their way back to the car and no one looked back. And then things just went back to normal around the Knorr house, quiet and sullen during the next few weeks, but eventually going back to, I guess, their version of normal anyway.
Only this time the abuse was put on Sheila.
Yeah, go ahead and take us off into that one.
You sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
So after they did this, I remember specifically from the book when they were driving home from dropping off Susan's body, a crow flew head first into their car windshield, cracked the windshield, and broke its neck. And everybody in the car thought it was some kind of omen. They all, including Teresa Sr., got very scared. I guess I can call her Trash Teresa. But so obviously she had to take it out on somebody. So her next daughter, Sheila Gay, because Teresa was unemployed, she was on state assistance. She wasn't getting a lot of money or, enough money because she always wanted to go out and do things for herself. And she was drinking most of the money away. So after Susan was murdered, they didn't really talk about her anymore. They weren't allowed to speak her name. If anyone asked, she had ran off. But really, nobody was asking because nobody was ever allowed to visit. The kids weren't allowed to go to school. So anyway, she forced 20-year-old Sheila to become a prostitute. Sheila was really horrified about it, but she didn't have the courage to disobey her mother because she saw what happened to Susan. So soon, Sheila was earning a ton of money from doing this and giving it all to Teresa. But in May of 1985, Teresa became suspicious and accused Sheila of becoming pregnant and infecting her, meaning Teresa Sr., with venereal disease from a common toilet seat. She beat Sheila very badly, tied her up, and shut her in an airless and hot closet without any food or water for 3 days. On the 21st of June, 1985, 3 days after she was locked up, there was a loud thump and then silence. Another 3 days passed before they opened the door to check on her, and her body was already decomposed. Sheila's body was hastily put into an old cardboard box, carried out to the car, and dumped in the weeds in Martis Creek Campground on Interstate 80. Though the body was discovered within just a few hours, the police couldn't identify her or determine cause of death, and Sheila became California's Jane Doe number 6607-85. On September 29th, 1986, Teresa got really paranoid and she packed everyone up and all of the things that she could fit. And she commanded her youngest daughter, Terry, to burn down the house. But the fire was noticed immediately and the fire department put it out. And by 1991, all of the children, except for her son, Robert, who I believe is the one that spoke on Evil Lives Here, they moved away. And eventually it was just she and Robert, and they moved to Las Vegas together. They were so desperate for money, she sent Robert to rob a North Nellis Boulevard bar, but he ended up killing the bartender. He received a 16-year sentence, and Teresa, who was nervous, moved to Salt Lake City, Utah thereafter. And in 1992, inspired by an episode of America's Most Wanted, Terry, so young Terry, the daughter, so the mother's Teresa, the daughter's Terry, contacted Nevada County Sheriff's Office and informed them of Susan and Sheila's murder. The police sergeant named Ron Perea was incredulous, and he interviewed Terry in person, and investigators were eventually able to establish the facts that left them with no doubt regarding that Terry was giving the right information. She identified the Jane Doe, and she knew about the other body that had been, Sheila's body that had been found. So that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that's awesome that it was America's Most Wanted. My hero, Robert Stack. Tonight you can solve a mystery. I love that show. Just when the music came on, you'd be creeped out. And I'll take
Wait, Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted?
Oh, it is America's Most Wanted.
That's because you love Robert Stack so much.
It is, and my head went the other way. Yeah, America's Most Wanted, totally different show.
But that's okay. We love Johnny Callahan Walsh too.
Yep. Now then, epilogue, Teresa was charged in the torture slayings of her two daughters and arraigned in Salt Lake City courtroom on November 15th, 1993. According to articles in the Sacramento Bee, she was extradited to Placer County the following month, arraigned before Superior Court Judge J. Richard Cozens, and charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 special circumstances, which were multiple murder and murder by torture charges, which would result in a death sentence. Amen. Teresa pleaded not guilty, of course, and was remanded to the Sacramento County Jail. That same day, John Cozens ordered William Robert Knorr prosecuted as an adult. Robert eventually struck a deal with prosecutors and agreed to testify against Teresa in exchange for a lighter sentence. 1 month later, as promised, all charges against him except a single count of conspiracy regarding Sheila's death were dropped. When Teresa learned of the deal Robert had made with the district attorney's office, she decided she did not want to take her chances with a death sentence and offered to plead guilty in exchange for her life. Yeah, exactly. When it's her life on the line.
So worried about her life, right?
Yeah. District Attorney John O'Mara agreed, unfortunately, and on October 17th, 1995, Teresa changed her plea to guilty. During sentencing, Judge William R. Ridgway characterized Teresa's crimes as callousness beyond belief, and I think that's putting it mildly. And he sentenced her to 2 consecutive life sentences. However, it is California, and she will be eligible for parole in 2027 if she lives to see it. She'll be 80 years old at that time, so mark your calendars on that one. We'll get up a petition to keep her in there.
Right. My sister finally showed up. Do you want to go? Do we have to end at 9? Do you want to go a little longer and just
go a little longer because we're right at 3 minutes away from that. And by the time we finish that, it'll be there.
Okay, so
just want to close it out here. Robert, who was still serving out his murder charge in Nevada, was eventually sentenced to 3 years in state prison. Court ordered the sentence to run concurrently with his 1991 murder sentence. William was placed on probation for his role in the murders and ordered to undergo therapy. That's good. On April 9, 2003, the Plain Dealer, a Cleveland, Ohio newspaper, ran an article entitled "Searching for Answers on Mothers Who Kill." According to the story, an American mother kills her child at the rate of once every 3 days. These cases are patterned and predictable, said Michelle Oberman, a legal scholar and expert on women who kill their offsprings. They are no longer shocking. They are now mundane. We just don't want to know what we know. Isn't that a sad state of affairs where killing your own children is just something that happens? Oh, well, 1 in 3, it's just your statistic.
I can't even imagine, I don't even spank my 2.5-year-old. We do time out, but like the only time I can ever imagine murdering someone is if they hurt my children. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to just think of murder in general, I could never ever even fathom it unless someone hurt my own children. So to even it's unfathomable to me. to murder one of my own
Yeah,
children.
same
You know.
to me to murder anybody, unless they
Well,
were trying
that's what I
to harm
mean.
me
Yeah.
or harm my
Self-defense.
daughter
No.
or Mulder or, get into my house or something. And even then, I'd try to run them off instead of just
Self-defense and hurting
flat out
someone,
killing
you
them.
know.
But your own child or any child or anybody and then again, these are even worse than the mothers we talked about last week who killed sometimes accidentally, I believe, if you can call it an accident in the cases of Casey Anthony and some of those people where they willingly did it. But the fact that these women tortured their own children or somebody else's children that they're charged with the care of before killing them, that's just, again, I don't understand that. I cannot get my head around that.
Yeah, me either. I mean, I see RJ, get a boo-boo on his hand and I want to cry, It's horrible. I think to hurt anyone's kids, and yeah, Rick Brapp, don't have kids if you're just going to kill them. We talked about last week, there's adoption, there's plenty of birth control. So
you got a kid you don't want, there's somebody that would gladly take it off. There's long adoption waiting list. You can also take it to any fire department, police precinct, hospital. Leave it on the steps, run away, make an anonymous call. That happens, and they take those babies in and care for them.
And you don't get in any trouble for it. Yeah, these chicks are crazy. We're going to cover something with some dudes too, because actually the next one, I don't know if we're going to do all of them: Bittaker, Norris, and Holmes.
You want to take the Pliers? You want to take Holmes? You want to take Toy Box? You want to take Lakening? We're going to have to do a second episode of these.
Yeah, well, maybe like
we'll
in
one
a
more
couple
tonight.
weeks. We'll bring it back in. Whatever you want to do, I'm on board. You choose.
Let's do H.H. Holmes. That's an old one, and an oldie but a goodie and a baddie. And I know you're well versed in that one.
He's becoming more and more popular, but H.H. Holmes is, again, I don't like saying my favorite serial killer.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. He's, I think, one of the most interesting to me.
Words out of my mouth.
And he is also the inspiration for American Horror Story, which, if you know me, you know that is my favorite show in the whole world. He is the inspiration for, what was his name? John Patrick March, who Evan Peters played in the Hotel series. The Hotel was inspired by the Cecil Hotel, and the Elisa Lam video is what actually sent that whole season.
Just the whole thing congeals well together.
The character of the man who built the hotel, because it had all the chambers, that was based directly on H.H. Holmes, and I'm sure most of you have heard of him. A lot of people on YouTube have been covering him, but his real name was Herman Webster Mudgett, and his birthday is the same as my ex-husband's, except he's 120 years older. So May 16th, 1861 to May 7th, 1896. He had so many aliases: Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, H.H. Holmes, and he confessed 27 murders. He was convicted and sentenced to death for only one, that of his accomplice and business partner, Benjamin Peitzel. It's speculated, though, that he may have killed as many as 200 people. And also there's a show, I believe it's on Netflix, called American Ripper, and the great, however many decades, grandson of Herman Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, believes that H.H. Holmes was actually Jack the Ripper. And if you guys watch that documentary, there's such compelling evidence that he was. So besides being a serious killer, Holmes was a con artist, a trigamist, the subject of more than 50 lawsuits in Chicago alone. And he was executed on May 7th, 1896, 9 days before he turned 35. So
he was an overachiever there to do all that before you're 35.
I was just going to say, you want to take it? Go ahead.
Yeah.
34 years old, doing big things.
Yeah, 34 years old, confessed to 27 murders, may have killed as many as 200. He had a mixed-use building he owned in Chicago, which was located about 3 miles west of the 1893 World's Fair Columbian Exposition. He referred to it as his murder castle, and he had done it up, and the way he kept it secret, he would hire different work crews to do different parts of it to kind of compartmentalize things. Then he'd fire that crew, bring in another crew, So everybody that worked on it didn't know exactly how it was being constructed and what was going on. He had secret rooms, he had trapdoors, he had gas vents installed in places where you normally wouldn't have a gas vent, and that was for gassing people. There was one example there where he put a couple of women in a trunk and put a rubber tube in there that was connected to the gas outlet in the room and gassed them to death. He Because of the Columbian Exposition, there a lot of people were drawn into town for that. I mean, that was the biggest thing that had ever happened in Chicago at that point. And I saw the same thing in 1982 during the World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. People came from all over the country and all over the world to work there. It ran for 6 months, and then it just disappeared. Kind of the same thing in Chicago here, and he used that to his advantage with the murder castle there. He would run ads in the paper saying that he had cheap rooming, cheap safe rooming for single women and things like that. And of course, a lot of women came there to work either at the fair or for other people during the fair as au pairs or domestic help or whatever. So, he had a good racket there. These were itinerant women from out of town, people.
And he was very good looking and charming.
Yeah, and all their family knows is, they went to work in Chicago and were never heard from again. This wasn't a time, when you had the news at your fingertips like you do today, and even big things that happened, murders and crimes that were astonishing and shocking, might take months before it hit the papers. So his first murders was his mistress Julia Smythe, and she was the wife of Ned Connor, who had moved into Holmes' building and began working at the pharmacy's jewelry counter. Yeah, he had a pharmacy too, and that was another thing. I don't think he was.
He never did anything honest. He was worse than he was Casey Anthonying way before Casey Anthony existed.
Yeah, he posed as a doctor and opened a pharmacy. I mean, back
he
then,
had
such a thing.
Gorgeous blue eyes, and what he would do is he would constantly fire the people that were helping to build the hotel so that nobody actually knew how it was being built, because he would fire one group of people and figure he's not going to pay them now and hire on more, and then change things around and have them. So he would do this over and over again so that he, number one, he felt like he didn't have to pay them because they did a terrible job and he was forced to fire them. And number two, nobody knew the rooms in this place. Nobody knew the layout, is the word I'm looking for, of the Holmes murder castle.
Wow, just amazing. We don't really have time to go into all this here, but he was into so many different things. There was like a murder for money type thing that he set up there with an insurance policy.
He was a grave robber.
And that was one of the things when they killed him, when they executed him, it was said that he remained calm right until the moment of his execution and showed very few signs of fear, anxiety, or depression. But his number one concern was he asked specifically for his coffin to be contained in cement and buried 10 feet deep, because he was concerned grave robbers like he would steal his body and either put it on tour or use it for dissection. And one sort of little karmic thing here, when he was hung, his neck did not snap.
He strangled
to death slowly, twitching for over 15 minutes before being pronounced dead 20 minutes after the trap had been sprung underneath his feet.
Yes, and they did grant his wish, and they dug him up for American Ripper because they thought that he had, it was an ongoing conspiracy theory, if you will, ongoing conspiracy, actually, that he had faked his own death, and that was like the biggest con of all that he had pulled off, but he did not. In fact, they did find his body there, and I mean, like Steve said, we really can't get into it. Carol, if you haven't heard about H.H. Holmes, I will put you on to him when I come by for the weekend tomorrow. And the rest of you guys, I was going to cover him, and then I realized there's so much coverage on YouTube. I'm going to put him away for a little while. I will come out with something.
There's been entire books written about him. I mean, big, nice, The Devil in White City.
Devil in the White City. Yes, I won't say where I was when I read that book, but let's just say it was one of the only books I had access to, and I had nothing else to do all day. So I actually ended up reading Devil in the White City, and it was amazing. And he just had, like, you'd walk into a room and he'd lock the door behind you, and then gas would start coming out of the walls, or you'd be legitimately asleep, and then all of a sudden, the floor would drop out from under you, and you'd be in the torture chamber. And one of the things he had were these, like, think of it as like a garbage chute. It was a garbage chute. And what it would do is he would take the dead bodies and put them in these garbage chutes. And the garbage chute would lead to like a sub basement filled with lime and what is it called? Lye and all those things that break down the body parts. And he would also put some bodies in barrels filled with this stuff. I mean, we don't have much more time, guys, but
he also trafficked in bodies. He
yes,
sold bodies to medical universities and things like that, and he even trafficked bodies to Canada. He would pack bodies off. He had a friend somewhere along the border, and would sneak bodies and then put them in the cell of a rental house he had in Vincent Street in Toronto. So there's no telling what all this guy really.
yeah, he was
35
into
years
some
old.
things. Yeah, I mean, again, if he was, how do you know when he was lying? He was talking. His mouth
lips
was
moved,
open. Yeah, his lips were moving. However, he was involved in so much stuff. And yeah, eventually I think I'm going to cover him. Like I said, I don't want to say favorite, but he is definitely one of the most interesting. He said there was a girl named Minnie that he ended up murdering, and he said that she was the only person in the entire world that he ever really thought he might have felt some love for. And he had children too. I mean, so I don't know. I think that's it for tonight.
Yeah, they're supposed to be making an adaptation of that. Martin Scorsese starring Leonardo DiCaprio. It's been
Ooh.
floundering around since it was announced in 2015, and Hulu supposedly agreed to a partnership with Paramount. Project was announced as a series, but no confirmation as to whether Scorsese and DiCaprio are still attached to it. And as this telling in 2021, production has yet to commence. But I would love to see that, and I think
Absolutely.
DiCaprio would make a very good H.H.
I
Holmes.
do too. Definitely. They even have the same color. H.H. Holmes's eyes are always what got me. They are this unnatural crystal, just beautiful blue. I don't think there's much that's attractive about him, but if you think about the time that he lived, I think that he was considered very handsome and very dashing. He also came off as very educated. He actually, how he got his fascination with skeletons, which is how he started out, first robbing graves and bleaching the bones, and then with the insurance scams of the killing people and bringing the bones as skeletons. He was terrified of walking past this doctor's office that he had to walk to. I think it was every day home from school, and the other kids would make fun of him because he was so scared, because they told him that the skeleton inside the doctor's office was human and that the doctor used it. So one day they dared him to, I don't know if they dared him to go in or if they locked him in the room, and he said that immediately upon seeing this bare skeleton, which back then they did not use plastic, they did use real people's skeletons, he said he immediately became fascinated with it, and there it went from there.
That's something that still exists. There's a company called Carolina Biological Supply, and you can order human bones, up to and including an entire skeleton. And I've often thought about that. Like, if I had a neighbor I didn't like, could I order a human skull and then just like bury it in his backyard and then turn him in? Actually, those that come from Carolina Biological Supply and other companies like that, they have like serial numbers engraved into them and stuff. But that's like a VIN number or whatever. Not that I know anything about this, but I know numbers can be sanded off. But that would at least give somebody a hard time proving their innocence, I guess. Would don't anybody do it to me. And just some other, we mentioned the American Ripper, the docuseries that was on History, and we also mentioned Eric Larson's wonderful book, The Devil in the White City.
Yes.
Murder, Magic, and Madness at the fair that changed America's history, or that changed America rather. There's a few other books if you want to check them out. One of those is The Torture Doctor by David Frank, The Scarlet Mansion by Alan Eckert, and Depraved, the shocking true story of America's first serial killer. He is described as America's first serial killer. That was by Harold Schechter. That one's an excellent read. I've read that one. And in Gem of the Prairie, an informal history of the Chicago underworld, there's a chapter dedicated to Holmes called The 63rd Street. Like also mentioned, American Gothic novel by Robert Bloch is about, or inspired by H.H. Holmes. It's a fictionalized account. And then there's a biography by Seltzer called H. Holmes, The True Story of the White City Devil. And then one of my favorites, there's a book of poetry by a writer named Sarah Tantlinger, Tantlinger, called The Devil's Dreamland, Poetry Inspired by H. Holmes. And it's as dark and as wonderful as it sounds. So um, there's a lot written about him out there, good, bad, and indifferent. And like I said, some of it almost fangirling over him, but it is what it is. But if he holds your interest, definitely check online and at your library and see what you have out there. Well, Gemma, I think that's about going to do it for us tonight.
Yes, sir. I got to get it crack-a-lacking. I'm hungry.
Same here. I haven't eaten anything today. Bowler and I are having jalapeno cheese dogs.
I think I'm just going to order some Chinese like I always do on Sunday. It's not even Sunday. I just almost said on Sunday nights.
You're either way early or way late, but you did that last time. You mentioned Chinese, and I couldn't rest until I had Chinese. I ordered it the next day. All right, well, folks, thank us for joining us.
No, thank us.
Thank you for joining us. I'll get it right in a minute.
Thank us for joining you.
16 watching, 19 likes. Good job. Thank you. Continue to like, share, and subscribe for more.
Yes, and please go over and subscribe to my channel. If somebody can please put a link. I'm still trying to get that first 1,000, guys.
Please help Gemma out.
I'm on a break this week because I'm catching up with scripts. I'm finishing right when I'm done here the Missing in the Fae Part 3 for Missing Persons and Mysteries. And then I've got on my channel Hybrids, Alien Hybrid Program, Shadow People, The Strange and Suspicious Celebrity Death of Brittany Murphy. It goes on and on. As requested, we are working on a 12 to 13 episode podcast with Caleb Smith's mother. I have that video on my channel, as well as Missing Persons and Mysteries does too. And that's why I do run behind on a lot of things that you guys suggest or your subscriber stories. It's really hard keeping up with all of it for me right now, but I'll have some free time freed up in the next couple of weeks. So I'll be able to put out more content. But please, if somebody could please put out, CJ, I love you. Please put a link to my channel up because I am doing the slow climb to 1,000.
I just put it in the link or the link in the channel there. That's Gemma Jade's channel. Please go subscribe.
And thanks everybody for having me. Steve always brings us out, so I'm just going to say my goodnights right now. I love you all. I appreciate all of you for coming out. Dezombified, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this, participate in your show here. I really love doing it. Carol, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. And everybody else, thank you so much for supporting us. Stemma here, and have your best night, have your best day, and I love you. Mwah.
And thanks to you, Gemma. Always a pleasure.
And thank you, Steve.
Not only my other half, but my better half. See, think of Stemma. There's only 2 letters in Steve, and the rest of it's from Gemma. So you're more than half of the show. But I enjoy having you here. Enjoy all the things we do together. We've got Friday night. We'll have something going on, some kind of campfire stories episode. I haven't heard from my guest. I don't know if she's going to be here.
But I'll be there.
We'll have something going for you. Sunday nights is our fireside chat every night, and those are on Missing Persons and Mysteries, my other channel. A lot of good stuff going on over there. And special coming at 100,000 subs, so help us get there. My personal channel, 13 Past Midnight. I've been doing ghost stories at midnight every night for the past 55 nights. This will be night 56. I recognize some of you.
I might stop in tonight too.
Yeah, stop in. It starts at midnight Pacific time and runs till generally about 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So it runs up till the middle of the day on the East Coast. So
yeah, so like 3 to 10 for me. Yeah, I might stop in and check it out.
A lot of fun. We have said it's an overnight crew. A lot of people listen to it that are insomniacs, chronic pain sufferers, PTSD, people with migraine headaches, fibromyalgia. It's a relaxing place to come and just chill. And we have a very active and very funny chat over there. Have about a dozen or so regulars that just keeps the place in stitches. But you're more than welcome to just come and lurk and listen to the stories too. And opening sequence over there, the music into it is me doing some dark ambient meanderings on the Moog synthesizer. So if you want to hear your old boy Steve tickling the ivories, come over there and check out the opening. I'm going to have some more of my music coming up. I've got my studio reset up after I'd added a bunch of equipment. Let's see what else. Do the morning chill show on have to stop and think sometimes. KPNL Radio's YouTube channel, and it's on the air and on the web and on the app. It's what it sounds like. It's a morning chill stream, chill out, jazz hop type music. And what else? I'm in the chat at SOR Radio 5 nights a week. Dave Scott's Spaced Out Radio. I engineer that stream and do the simulcast for KPNL. So I'm all over the place. You can catch me any of those. Excuse me. And I'm going to get off here now and go get something to eat, something to drink, take Mulder out. But again, thanks for coming. We will see you next week. I don't know what kind of topic we'll have.
We're going to surprise you.
We're going to surprise you. We're going to get together over the weekend, and we're going to plan out maybe a month or two of shows. So have a better idea. We were kind of ill-prepared when we came into this evening because time got away from us, but it still worked out really, really well. And again, thanks to our friends Dezombified, Kenny Dread, and Dreadful and Miss Stereo. Thank you for having us on. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to these guys too. They work hard at what they do and for what they add to the true crime and horror community. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us for this show. I will see you later at SOR or Missing Persons, or I'm sorry, Ghost Stories at Midnight. I've got so many shows here. Carol, I will send you a link. And I was going to say something else. Totally lost my train of thought. All right. Once again, on behalf of me and Gemma, Stemma, as we're known collectively, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you all next time. Have a good day, good evening, good morning, good night, good Lord, whatever it is, wherever you are. I'm Steve Stockton. I love every one of you. Mwah.